The morning sun had just begun to peek over the hills surrounding Willow Creek Ranch when Tom first noticed something was wrong. It was a Tuesday in early spring, the kind of crisp morning that usually filled the ranch with energy and purpose. But today, that energy was replaced by a heavy silence as Tom stood frozen at the entrance to the stable. Thunder, his prized Arabian stallion, was lying on his side in the straw. The horse's dark eyes, usually bright and alert, looked back at Tom with what could only be described as fear. Tom had raised many horses in his 53 years, but none quite like Thunder. The 7-year-old stallion was special, chestnut-colored with a white blaze down his face and a spirit that seemed to connect with everyone he met. "Come on, boy. Up you get," Tom said softly, approaching the horse with gentle steps. But Thunder only responded with a desperate whinny, his front legs pawing at the ground while his hind legs remained still. Tom's heart sank. He'd seen enough injured animals in his life to recognize when something was seriously wrong. Within the hour, Doc Wilson's truck was kicking up dust as it came down the long driveway. The old veterinarian had been treating the animals at Willow Creek for over 20 years. If anyone could help Thunder, it would be him. "How long has he been down?" Doc asked, setting his worn leather bag on a nearby hay bale. "Found him like this at feeding time. He was fine yesterday, even took my youngest for a ride in the afternoon," Tom replied, his weathered face tight with worry. Doc's examination was thorough but quick. He checked Thunder's reflexes, ran his hands along the horse's spine, and looked into his eyes. With each test, his expression grew more grave. Finally, he straightened up with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of decades of delivering bad news. "I think he's paralyzed in the hindquarters, Tom. Can't find any breaks or obvious injuries, but something's damaged his nerves. Might be an injury we can't see, might be a disease." Either way, he trailed off, but Tom knew what came next. "There must be something we can do," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. The thought of losing Thunder was more than he could bear. This wasn't just any horse. This was the animal that had helped his wife find joy again after her mother passed, the gentle soul that never spooked when their 6-year-old daughter fed him carrots and told him her secrets. Doc Wilson placed a hand on Tom's shoulder. "We can try some anti-inflammatories, give him pain relief. But if he can't stand within a week, well, you know what the kind thing would be." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Tom made Thunder as comfortable as possible, adding extra bedding and moving him to a larger stall. He called his wife, who was in town with their daughter. He tried to keep his voice steady as he explained what had happened, but the crack in his words gave away his heartbreak. That evening, the family gathered in the stable. Tom's wife, Lily, knelt beside Thunder, stroking his neck and fighting back tears. Their older son, just home from college, stood silently at the stall door, remembering how Thunder had been a gangly colt when he left for school. And their little girl, only 6 years old with pigtails and missing front teeth, curled up against Thunder's neck, whispering something no one else could hear. "We'll give him a week," Tom announced, looking at his family. "Doc says we should try everything we can for a week. If he's not better by then—" He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The unspoken reality hung in the air. Their beloved Thunder, the heart of their small family ranch, might soon be gone forever. What no one knew then, as they filed out of the stable with heavy hearts, was that the next 7 days would bring a miracle no one expected, least of all from the smallest member of their family. The news about Thunder spread through the household like a cold winter draft. Lily stood at the kitchen sink, mechanically washing the same plate over and over, her mind 1,000 miles away. She'd raised that horse from a wobble-legged colt, bottle-fed him when his mother died shortly after birth. To think of him suffering, unable to run through the meadows he loved so much, it was almost unbearable. "Mom, you've been washing that plate for 5 minutes," said their teenage son, Jack, his voice gentle as he took it from her hands. At 17 he tried to act tough, but Thunder had been his companion through the awkward years of middle school when friends were hard to come by. Lily wiped her hands on her apron and managed a weak smile. "I just keep thinking about when we first got him. Remember how he used to follow you around like a puppy?" Jack nodded, swallowing hard. "Dad says Doc Wilson thinks we should, by next Tuesday if there's no improvement." The word euthanize hung unspoken between them. Neither could bring themselves to say it out loud, as if naming the possibility might make it real. Tom spent that night in the barn, sitting on a bale of hay near Thunder's stall. The horse dozed fitfully, occasionally lifting his head to look at Tom with those knowing eyes. Tom had grown up on this land, had seen animals born and die, had weathered droughts and floods and everything in between. But something about Thunder's situation cut deeper than he'd expected. "We're not giving up on you yet, old friend," he whispered, reaching through the slats to stroke the horse's muzzle. The hardest part was little Katie. At just 6 years old, she didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew her beloved Thunder was hurt. Each morning before school, she'd run to the barn to see him. Each afternoon, she'd do the same. She'd sit in the straw beside him, sometimes reading from her picture books, sometimes just talking to him about her day. How do we tell her? Lily asked Tom that Friday night after Katie had gone to bed. They sat at the kitchen table, cups of coffee growing cold between them. If he doesn't improve, how do we explain it to her? Tom rubbed his face with weathered hands. Maybe we don't have to. Maybe there's still a chance. But the weekend brought no improvement. Thunder ate the special feed Lily prepared, drank water, and seemed alert, but his hind legs remained lifeless despite Doc Wilson's treatments. The family moved through their days like sleepwalkers, going through the motions of normal life while dread built in their hearts. On Sunday afternoon, they gathered for a family meeting, something they hadn't done since deciding whether Jack could go to summer camp 3 years ago. "Thunder might not get better," Tom began, his voice steady even as his hands trembled slightly. "Doc Wilson says keeping him alive like this might be cruel. He's in pain, and horses aren't meant to live lying down." "You mean you're going to kill him?" Katie asked suddenly, her small voice cutting through the room like a knife. Her lower lip trembled, but her eyes were surprisingly clear and direct. Lily moved to hug her. "No, honey, not kill. But sometimes, when animals are very sick and hurting, the kindest thing is to help them, not hurt anymore." "Like putting them to sleep?" Katie asked. She'd heard this explanation when her classroom goldfish died last year. Tom nodded slowly. "Something like that. But we haven't decided anything yet. We still have 2 more days to see if he gets better." Katie stood up suddenly, her small frame vibrating with determination. "He'll get better. I just know it. He told me so." The adults exchanged glances, the sad, knowing looks of people who understood harsh realities that children were still protected from. Katie saw that look, and her face hardened with a resolve that seemed too old for her years. "You'll see," she said quietly, turning to leave the room. "Thunder's not going anywhere. I promise." As she walked away, Tom felt something unexpected, a tiny flicker of hope, kindled by his daughter's absolute certainty. Children sometimes saw things adults couldn't. Maybe, just maybe, Katie knew something they didn't. What none of them realized was how right that thought would prove to be. Katie woke up before sunrise on Monday morning. Without making a sound, she slipped out of bed, pulled on her rubber boots over her pajamas, and grabbed the small backpack she'd packed the night before. Inside were things she thought might help Thunder. Her favorite book, a brush for his mane, some sugar cubes sneaked from the kitchen, and a tiny stuffed horse that had been her comfort toy since she was 3. The path to the barn was dewy and cold under her feet. The world was still gray, birds just beginning their morning songs as she quietly unlatched the side door. The smell of hay and horses greeted her, a smell that had always meant home and happiness, but now carried a hint of sadness too. "Good morning, Thunder," she whispered, settling down in the straw beside the big horse. His ears perked forward at the sound of her voice, and he gave a soft nickering sound that Katie was sure meant he was happy to see her. "I brought you some presents," she continued, pulling items from her backpack. "This is Whisper," she said, showing him the stuffed horse. "He can keep you company when I'm at school." Thunder sniffed the toy curiously, then nudged Katie's hand with his nose. Unlike the grown-ups who saw only a sick animal, Katie saw her friend, the same Thunder who'd let her braid ribbons into his mane, who'd stood patiently while she learned to brush him, who seemed to listen with his whole body when she told him about mean Billy Thompson, who pulled her hair at recess. For the next hour, Katie read to Thunder from her favorite book about a magic pony. She wasn't the best reader in her class, that was Andy with the glasses, but she tried hard, sounding out the difficult words. When she stumbled, she'd look up to find Thunder watching her with those big, gentle eyes, as if encouraging her to continue. "Dad says you might have to go away," she said finally, closing the book. "But I don't think so. You're just stuck, that's all. Like when my zipper gets caught in my coat. It doesn't mean the coat is broken forever. It just needs someone to fix it right." She began to brush Thunder's mane with long, careful strokes. Her mom had taught her how, showing her to be gentle but firm, to work out the tangles without pulling. It was their special time together, caring for Thunder. Maybe that's why Katie noticed things the grown-ups missed. They were always in such a hurry, always thinking about the next chore, the next problem. "Does it hurt here?" she asked, running her small hand along Thunder's neck. The horse blinked calmly. "How about here?" Her hand moved to his shoulder. Thunder remained still. Katie continued her gentle investigation, talking to Thunder the whole time like they were having a real conversation. "You're not so different from people, you know," she told him. "When I fell off the swing and hurt my knee, I couldn't walk good for a while either. But then it got better." She patted his side reassuringly. "You'll get better too." When her dad found her there an hour later, Katie was curled up against Thunder's neck, both of them dozing in the early morning light. He stood watching them for a moment, his heart both warmed and broken by the sight. "Katie Bug," he said softly, "time for breakfast. You've got school today." She stirred and looked up at him, her eyes still foggy with sleep. "Thunder and I were having a talk," she said matter-of-factly. "He doesn't want to go away." Tom knelt down beside her. "I know, sweetheart. None of us want that." "Then we need to help him," she said, standing up and dusting straw from her pajamas, with the determined air of someone setting out on an important mission. "And I'm going to figure out how." Throughout that day at school, while other kids played tag and learned about butterflies, Katie's mind stayed in the barn with Thunder. She barely heard her teacher, Mrs. Chen, asking her about her weekend. She didn't even notice when Billy Thompson put a cricket on her desk. In Katie's mind, she was turning over every detail about Thunder, every inch of his body she'd touched, every reaction he'd had. There was something there, something important, if only she could figure it out. And Katie was very good at puzzles. What she didn't know yet was that her patience and careful attention would soon uncover what everyone else had missed. Tuesday morning arrived with a heaviness hanging over the farm. It was day 5 since Thunder had collapsed, the day Doc Wilson would return to check on him, the day decisions might have to be made. Katie had barely touched her breakfast. The moment the school bus pulled away without her, her mom had called her in sick. Sensing the little girl needed this day at home, Katie ran straight to the barn, her ponytail bouncing behind her. "I'm here, Thunder," she called softly as she entered. The horse greeted her with a gentle whinny that made Katie smile despite everything. She settled down in her usual spot, pulling out her special horse grooming kit that her grandpa had given her for her birthday. "Today I'm going to make you extra handsome for when the doc comes," she told Thunder, taking out a soft brush. "And I'm going to find what's making you hurt." Katie had been thinking hard about Thunder's problem. Last night, she'd even asked to borrow her brother Jack's book about horses, though most of the words were too big for her to understand. But there were pictures of horse bones and muscles that she'd studied by flashlight under her covers. "You know what, Thunder? My teacher says when you have a question, you should look at all the clues," she told the horse as she began brushing his gleaming coat. "So I'm going to look at all of you really, really carefully." Katie started with Thunder's head, gently running her hands over his face, behind his ears, down his strong neck. She worked methodically, the way she'd seen Doc Wilson do, though her hands were much smaller. Thunder seemed to understand, standing still despite being unable to rise. "Does this hurt?" she asked repeatedly, watching his reactions. Most places, Thunder stayed relaxed, occasionally blowing air softly through his nostrils. Katie moved down to his shoulders, his front legs, no reaction, then to his back. As her small fingers moved along his spine, something changed. When she reached a spot just above where his saddle usually sat, Thunder's ears suddenly flicked back. His muscles twitched under her hand. "Did that hurt?" Katie asked, lifting her hand immediately. She tried again, touching the same spot. Again, Thunder's ears flattened, and this time he made a small noise in his throat. Katie frowned, concentrating hard. This was different. She'd touched Thunder hundreds of times before and never seen him react this way. Gently, she pressed the area again. There was something not quite right about that spot, not something she could see, but something she could feel. A tiny, hard bump under the skin that shouldn't be there. "Mom," she shouted, startling the barn swallows nesting in the rafters. "Mom, come quick." Lily appeared at the barn door moments later, wiping her hands on her jeans. "What is it, honey? Is Thunder worse?" Katie shook her head, her eyes wide with excitement. "No, I found something. Come feel." Lily walked over, kneeling beside her daughter. "What did you find?" "Here." Katie guided her mother's hand to the spot on Thunder's back. "Press right here, but gentle. See how he doesn't like it, and feel that tiny bump." Lily placed her fingers where Katie showed her, pressing softly. Thunder's reaction was immediate. His ears pinned back, and he shifted uncomfortably. "There's something in there, Mom," Katie said with absolute certainty. "Something that doesn't belong. That's why he can't walk. It's hurting him right here." Lily's brow furrowed as she carefully felt the area again. There was indeed something there, small, but definitely not normal. "Tom," she called out. "Tom, come here." Within minutes, the whole family was gathered around. Tom felt the spot himself, his weathered fingers detecting the strange lump that his daughter had discovered. "She might be onto something," he said slowly, wonder creeping into his voice. "How did we all miss this?" "Because you weren't looking in the right place," Katie said simply. "You were looking at his legs because that's what's not working, but the problem is in his back." Jack stared at his little sister with newfound respect. "It could be pressing on a nerve or something. I read about that in biology class." Tom was already reaching for his phone. "I'm calling Doc Wilson. He needs to see this right away." As her dad made the call, Katie leaned close to Thunder's ear. "See," she whispered. "I told you we'd figure it out. You're not broken, you just need fixing." For the first time in 5 days, hope flickered to life in the old barn. All because a 6-year-old girl had looked at a problem through different eyes. Doc Wilson arrived at the farm just after lunch, his old truck kicking up dust as it rolled down the driveway. His face was grave when he stepped out. He'd come prepared for what he thought would be a difficult conversation about putting Thunder down. Instead, he found the family waiting for him with something he hadn't expected to see, hope in their eyes. "Tom called and said your little one found something," he asked Lily as they walked toward the barn. Katie noticed a spot on Thunder's back that seems to cause him pain, Lily explained. "There's a small lump there we hadn't noticed before." Doc Wilson nodded, but his expression remained cautious. After 30 years as a country vet, he'd learned not to raise expectations too high. "Let's have a look then." In the barn, Katie was sitting beside Thunder, whispering to him and stroking his neck. She jumped up when the adults entered. "Doc Wilson, I found Thunder's owie," she announced, pointing to the spot on the horse's back. "It's right here, and it hurts him when you touch it. I think that's why he can't walk." The old vet kneeled down, his joints creaking in protest. He ran his hands over Thunder's back, feeling carefully where Katie indicated. When he pressed on the spot, Thunder's reaction was immediate. The horse twitched, and his ears flattened against his head. "Well, I'll be," Doc Wilson murmured. He pressed again, more gently, feeling the small, hard lump beneath the skin. "There is something there." "What is it?" Tom asked, hovering nearby. Could it be causing his paralysis? Doc Wilson stood up slowly, a thoughtful look on his weathered face. "Possibly. It's in the right location to be pressing on nerves that control his hind legs." He turned to Katie with newfound respect. "Young lady, you may have just saved your horse's life." Katie beamed, but then her face grew serious. "Can you fix it?" The vet sighed. "I'm afraid this is beyond my expertise. This isn't something I can handle in a barn with my basic tools." Seeing Katie's face fall, he quickly added, "But I know someone who might be able to help." He pulled out his cell phone and walked a few steps away, speaking in a low voice. The family waited, hardly daring to breathe. Katie returned to Thunder's side, petting him softly. "He's going to be okay," she told the horse with absolute certainty. "I promised you, remember?" After what seemed like forever, Doc Wilson returned. "I just spoke with Dr. Patel at the University Animal Hospital. She's a specialist in equine neurology. That means she knows all about horse nerves and spines. He explained for Katie's benefit. I described what we found and she's interested. Very interested. She can help. Lily asked, clutching Tom's hand. She thinks so. From what I described, she suspects there might be a foreign object embedded near Thunder's spine. Could be a piece of metal, could be something else. If it's pressing on the right nerves, removing it might restore function to its hind legs. How soon can she see him? Tom asked. That's the tricky part. We'd need to transport Thunder to the university hospital, about 2 hours from here. And with him unable to stand, Doc Wilson trailed off. The logistical challenge is evident. We'll figure it out, Tom said firmly. If there's a chance to save him, we'll find a way. For the next hour, phone calls flew back and forth. Jack searched online for specialized horse transport services. Lily called neighbors who might have equipment to help. Through it all, Katie stayed with Thunder, keeping him calm, telling him about the adventure they would have going to the big hospital. By sunset, the plan was set. A specialized transport with a hydraulic lift would arrive first thing in the morning. Dr. Patel would be ready for them by noon. As the family ate dinner that night, the mood was completely transformed from the heaviness of the morning. There was laughter, there were excited voices talking over one another, there was planning. Most importantly, there was hope, all because a little girl had noticed what everyone else had missed. You know, Tom said, ruffling Katie's hair, grown-ups sometimes forget to look at things properly. We get so caught up in what we think is happening that we miss what's really there. Katie nodded seriously. That's okay, Dad. That's why kids are here. To remind you. That night, as Lily tucked Katie into bed, she asked the question that had been on her mind all day. How did you know to check Thunder's back so carefully? Katie yawned sleepily. Because I listened to him. He was trying to tell us all along where it hurt. I just paid attention. Sometimes the wisest words come from the youngest hearts. The morning arrived with a pale yellow sun and a sky full of promise. By 6 o'clock, the entire family was already up and moving around the farm like clockwork, each person with their own job to do. Tom checked and double-checked the path from the barn to where the transport truck would park. Lily prepared a special breakfast for Thunder, his favorite apples and oats with a touch of molasses. Jack gathered blankets and supplies they might need for the journey. And Katie? Katie sat with Thunder, talking to him in a low, reassuring voice about the adventure ahead. The doctors are going to make you all better, she told him, stroking his gleaming coat. It might be a little scary, but I'll be right there. Well, not in the operating room because they don't let kids in there, but I'll be waiting right outside. The specialized transport arrived at 7:30. A massive truck with a hydraulic lift platform and padded sides. The driver, a burly man named Pete with kind eyes and a grey beard, had been moving injured horses for 20 years. So this is our patient, Pete said, kneeling down to look at Thunder. Handsome fellow, aren't you? He turned to Katie, who was watching his every move. And you must be the smart young lady who figured out what was wrong. Katie nodded solemnly. I'm his best friend. I'm going with him. Wouldn't have it any other way, Pete replied with a wink. Loading Thunder was a delicate process. Pete had brought special harnesses designed to support a horse that couldn't stand. With Tom and Jack helping, they carefully secured the straps around Thunder's body, then slowly activated the hydraulic lift. Thunder's eyes were wide with fear, but Katie never left his sight, walking alongside as he was raised and gently maneuvered into the truck. You're doing great, Thunder, she encouraged him. You're so brave. The 2-hour drive to the University Animal Hospital felt like the longest journey of their lives. Katie sat in the truck's cab with her parents and Pete, turning around every few minutes to peek through the small window into the horse compartment where Jack sat with Thunder. When they'd finally arrived, a team was waiting for them, veterinarians in blue scrubs and assistants with gentle hands and soothing voices. Dr. Patel, a woman with intelligent eyes and a confident smile, introduced herself and immediately began examining Thunder while he was still in the transport. You were right to bring him in, she told the family after feeling the mysterious lump on Thunder's back. There's definitely something foreign embedded here. Let's get him into imaging right away. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Thunder was carefully moved into a special examination room with equipment Katie had never seen before, machines that could look inside Thunder's body without hurting him. Dr. Patel showed the family the images on a computer screen. There, clear as day, was a small metal object lodged dangerously close to Thunder's spine. "It's a bullet fragment," Dr. Patel explained, her finger tracing the bright spot on the screen. "Probably from a stray shot that hit him some time ago. It wasn't a problem until recently, when it shifted position and started pressing on these nerves." She pointed to thin white lines branching out from Thunder's spine. "That's what's causing the paralysis." "Can you remove it?" Tom asked, his voice tense with hope and fear. Dr. Patel nodded slowly. "I believe so, but I have to be honest, it's a very delicate operation. The fragment is pressing on important nerves, and removing it carries risks. If we damage those nerves during surgery, the paralysis could become permanent." A heavy silence fell over the room. This was the moment of decision. "What would you do if it was your horse?" Lily asked quietly. "I'd give him a chance," Dr. Patel replied without hesitation. "He's otherwise healthy and young. He deserves that chance." "Then do it," Tom said firmly. "We trust you." As the surgery team began their preparations, they explained that the operation would take several hours. The family was shown to a waiting room where they could rest, but Katie wouldn't sit still. "I need to see him before you start," she insisted, looking up at Dr. Patel with determined eyes. "I promised I'd be with him." Dr. Patel smiled. "Of course. Come with me." In the pre-op area, Katie stood beside Thunder one last time before surgery. The big horse was already drowsy from pre-medication, but his eyes focused on her when she spoke. "You're going to fall asleep, and when you wake up, that thing that's hurting you will be gone," she told him, her small hand resting on his nose. "And then we can run in the meadow again. I just know it." As they led Katie back to her parents, Dr. Patel squeezed her shoulder gently. "You know, sometimes animals fight harder when they have someone to fight for. Thunder is lucky to have you." The long wait had begun. 3 hours of surgery stretched ahead, with a little girl's faith hanging in the balance. The clock on the waiting room wall seemed to move in slow motion. Tom paced back and forth, counting his steps to pass the time. Lily flipped through old magazines without really seeing the pages. Jack had fallen asleep on an uncomfortable plastic chair, his lanky teenage frame somehow folded into the small space. And Katie sat cross-legged on the floor, carefully drawing a picture of Thunder running free in a green field. "He's going to be able to run again," she said to no one in particular, adding a bright yellow sun to her drawing. The door finally opened after 3.5 hours. Dr. Patel walked in, still wearing her surgical cap, but with her mask pulled down. The entire family held their breath, searching her face for clues. "We got it," she said, holding up a small container. Inside was a tiny metal fragment, no bigger than a pencil eraser. "The bullet fragment has been removed successfully." Lily's hands flew to her mouth. Tom's shoulders sagged with relief. Jack jerked awake at the commotion. And Katie? Katie simply nodded as if she'd known all along. "Can we see him?" she asked, already gathering her drawings. "He's in recovery now," Dr. Patel explained. "He'll be groggy from the anesthesia for a while. You can see him briefly, but then he needs rest. The next 24 hours are critical." They'd followed Dr. Patel through a maze of corridors to a large recovery stall. Thunder lay on his side on a thick bed of straw, his breathing steady but his eyes closed. Various monitors beeped softly nearby, and a young vet assistant sat on a stool in the corner, keeping watch. "The surgery went as well as we could have hoped," Dr. Patel told them as they gazed at Thunder through the stall door. "The fragment wasn't as deeply embedded as we feared. But I want to be clear, we won't know if the procedure was successful in restoring movement until he wakes up fully and tries to stand. And even then, recovery could take weeks or months." "But he has a chance now," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. "A very good chance," Dr. Patel agreed. "And much of that is thanks to your daughter's discovery." Katie approached the stall door and wiggled her fingers through the slats. "Thunder," she called softly. "We got the airway out. Now you can get better." To everyone's surprise, the horse's ears twitched at the sound of her voice. His eyes opened slightly, finding Katie in his blurry field of vision. "He knows you're here," Dr. Patel said with a smile. "That's a very good sign." The next day brought another good sign. Thunder began showing reflexes in his hind legs. Not movement exactly, but small twitches when Dr. Patel tested his nerves. The day after that, he could move his back legs slightly on his own. Each tiny improvement was celebrated like a miracle. On the fourth day after surgery, the moment they'd all been hoping for finally came. With the help of a special harness system hanging from the ceiling, the medical team attempted to help Thunder stand. Katie watched from outside the stall, barely breathing as Thunder struggled, his legs wobbling like a newborn colt's. "Come on, Thunder," she whispered. "You can do it." As if hearing her encouragement, Thunder pushed harder. His back legs trembled violently, but they held. For the first time in nearly 2 weeks, he was standing. The farm became Thunder's rehabilitation center over the following months. Every day after school, Katie worked with him, leading him on slow walks that gradually grew longer. Tom built a special support frame that helped Thunder keep his balance in the beginning. Lily prepared special meals to help him regain his strength. Jack recorded videos of his progress to send to Dr. Patel. By summer, the support frame was no longer needed. Thunder could walk on his own, though he still had a slight unsteadiness in his gait. By fall, he was trotting around the small paddock. And on a crisp morning in October, with the leaves turning gold and red on the trees, Katie climbed onto Thunder's back for the first time since his surgery. "Ready for an adventure?" she asked, leaning forward to hug his neck. Thunder's answer was to break into a gentle canter across the meadow, his stride growing more confident with each step. Behind them, Tom and Lily watched with tears in their eyes, witnessing what many had said was impossible. The story spread beyond their small farm. First to neighbors, then to the local paper, and eventually to a television news crew that came to film the miracle horse saved by a 6-year-old's discovery. People wrote letters from across the country, sharing their own stories of hope and healing. But fame wasn't what mattered to Katie. What mattered was galloping across the fields on her best friend, the wind in her hair and the future wide open before them, all because she had looked with her heart and seen what others had missed.